on. There we go. Okay, whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready to go. So I guess let's we'll get started here. So good evening, everybody, in person. And that's got to sound pretty weird for the people joining on Zoom. I am Michael Bergen. I'm here tonight to talk about kind of a little bit about the neighborhood history and the street history, or the names of our streets history. Because here we are celebrating Government Week, our town government week. So I really wanted to focus something even more kind of town oriented than our normal programming here. So like I said, this might be a little weird. I am coming to you from home. Also, I have shaved the beard off, so that's a little different. My summertime look is coming in. So we will get this show started. Now, I know we're going to talk about the neighborhoods, but first I'd like to talk about kind of the streets, because the streets are what make up neighborhoods to begin with, right? So I'm going to go ahead and share this here. Hopefully I don't lose too much. All right, we'll just stretch this out here. So, okay, now there is a ton of streets in North Bergen, right? Accountably, there's a good number of them, and we know our numbered streets, and if that makes sense, why they're numbered the way they are, is, it's numerical order. That's kind of the way numbered streets work. But we had a ton of named streets that we call them by these names all the time, and really nobody, I don't think, really stops to think about where does that name come from, whose name is it. So that's kind of what I've done, and we've researched these names and kind of got an idea of where they come from, when they're created, and why we name them after that. So I like to start this event, and again, I always get a lot of guff from people from downtown North Bergen that I don't do anything on them. So for these, this is the downtown event where I start downtown. Okay, so now the downtown people can't be mad at me anymore. But like I said, our street names are going to be named after a couple of different things, right? We have geographic street names, like this one. Oops, sorry, we jumped ahead to there. Like this one, Sea Caucus Road, right? That is going to be the first street in North Bergen, not first made street, but that's our first street coming from downtown. And it's simple. It's named because it connected to Sea Caucus. And it's hard for us to imagine this, but during the 18th and 19th century, especially more the 18th century, early 19th century, you have nothing but farmland in Sea Caucus. And this was the quick route for them to get their goods to the market in Jersey City, to the waterfront in Hoboken. And the road or what I could find out about the road, is that this road, the named road anyways, is going to go back to the 1830s. So this is a pretty old one. Now, this is a major thoroughway, so it would make sense that since this road goes back this early, we're going to have a neighborhood built around it. Some of the streets are relatively old, and one of them is somewhat new. The newest is going to be Newcastle Road. Now, sometimes when it comes to naming streets, developers are kind of just given a list of names to choose from. So that is where we get some of these names from. Newcastle Road is one of those. It comes out in the 1990s. All right. It is the area over there is built up by the Grand Construction Corporation. Okay. And the roadway was created to support the developments that were constructed there, literally to support it. So if you ever go down there, Newcastle Road actually goes down off of Grand Avenue. And it's actually pretty interesting to see it. But that whole road is created to give these people a back entrance. And it actually looks like a castle if you stand down below. It gives this kind of height to the development down there. Then you have Columbia Avenue. This is a quite older one. And this is one that we really don't know where the name comes from, right? It's a myriad of reasons why it could have been called Columbia. There's people, there's places, animals, ships, you name it, universities that these could have came from. One thing that I think is really interesting, and the thing I think the street is named after, is a yacht called the Columbia. Now, why a yacht? I mean, North Bergen's not known for its maritime history or anything, but in 1871, about the time that the road was laid, there was this yacht called the Columbia, and it defended the America Cup against the English challenger, the Livonia. So the developers of the area, Tyler and Gobish, we'll talk about them in a little bit, I think that's kind of where they get the name from, especially with some of the other names that are going to be there. So I feel pretty confident saying it's named after this boat. So it's a pretty interesting name. Uh, we go here to Bove Terrace. Now this is named after a person. It's named after specifically George Bove, who was a carpenter who lived and operated in that area in the 1920s, and he began to fix up the area a little bit. And he built all of those kind of quote unquote those modern brick homes that we see down in that neighborhood. So if you're going to build homes, guess what? You're going to get a street named after you. Then we go to one of my favorite ones. It's one of the only street names that we've had changed in the history of the town. So this is Liberty Avenue. Now, this is where it gets kind of confusing because there's Liberty Avenue kind of close to Six Corners. And we got to talk about that because that was originally called something first before Liberty. But this Liberty Ave that we're talking about here specifically, right, this downtown Liberty Ave, was originally called Germania Avenue. And the road was created again by the Tyler Park neighborhood. And at one point, it did spread into New Durham. But what happens is when World War I starts, there's a wave of anti-German sentiment that kind of spreads through the nation. And in and around 1917, Germania Avenue is changed to Liberty Avenue, right, in face of the ongoing war. Now, we'll head a little further north. Or actually, I missed this one. Sorry about that. Grand Avenue. How can I forget Grand Avenue? It's originally called Nelson Avenue, which we could see that when you cross the border into Jersey City. It's interchangeable for a lot of its early history. A lot of records we found in North Bergen is that even after they created Grand Avenue, it was still referred to as Nelson Avenue. Why it's called Grand Avenue is a bit of a mystery still to this day. Grand is not named for obviously a person or a place. One theory is that Grand is referencing the homes that line the street, again, in that Tyler Park section. So if you're ever on Grand Ave down there, there are some pretty large homes. Another theory is going to be that Grand Avenue on several maps is actually intended to be a main thoroughfare, something kind of similar to what we would say Kennedy Boulevard is like, and was kind of meant to spread completely through town at one point. And again, Tunnelly Avenue will be a better example of it today. Kennedy Boulevard's a great example. There's really several plans of what it would have been. Some showed just really homes developed on the area. Some showed business districts. So it is kind of a big what if question of what would have happened if they really went through the Grand Avenue plan. So we're going to jump around now because this is just going to pull me north. Obviously, Tunnelly Avenue, very big name street in this town, and it's mainly a big name because everybody pronounces it differently depending on where you are and where you're from. It's named though for John Tunnelly Jr. So Tunnelly, originally spelled the French spelling here, Tonnelle. I don't know. I'm just guessing how to speak French now. He settled in Hudson County or Hudson City, excuse me, present day Jersey City in 1835. So he's this prominent and wealthy landowner. He's a politician. Tunnelly serves actually 3 terms on the Hudson County Board of Chosen Freeholders, and then he moves into the state Senate. He will pass away in 1852. So now there is some debate, though, about which Tunnelly the street is going to be named for. Most believe it is John Tunnelly Jr. However, there are some, and this is the Jersey City folks who actually think this, that it's named for his son. And the reason they think it's named for his son is because, well, the son was the Civil War officer, operated with the 2nd New Jersey Militia. His name, John Laurent Tunnelly. Then there's also the debate, again, over the spelling, 1 L, 2 L's, right? And what I can tell you is the roadway wasn't named for Tunnelly until 1883. So again, I can also tell you that Tunnelly Avenue that we know today is very different. The first Tunnelly Avenue is actually going to be a side street, which is now Liberty Avenue. So we'll take a look at that as well. But Tunnelly Avenue, it's just this name. Nobody knows what to do with it. And GPSs have been pronouncing it wrong since GPS has been invented. We'll take a look here. Patterson Plank Road, geographic road. Okay, it's going to be like we're going to see with Bergen Turnpike. Patterson Plank Road is at one point physically a plank road that connected Patterson with Jersey City, and then beyond. The plank road dates back to the mid-18th century, and it's named for the city of Patterson. as it was the main way Patterson silk mills sent their goods to markets in New York City and Europe. You got to remember, prior to Route 80, this is going to be the fastest, easiest way to get your goods to market. Tucked away in all these numbered streets over here, we have Dietz Place. So this is a toss-up. You know, this is one of these ones we're not sure who it's named for. We do know it's named for one of the Dietz brothers, either Charles or Connor. So Charles Dietz, he was actually mayor of North Bergen for 13 years, from 1900 to 1913. However, his brother Connor operated the Dietz Hotel, which was actually located at present-day 22nd Street and Kennedy Boulevard, right in front of where Dietz Place is going to be named. So again, not really sure which one of the Dietz brothers it's named for. I put my money on Connor. But again, who knows? Maybe the name comes when Charles was in office and kind of hooked up his brother with a street. Let's go up a little further north here. All right, so we'll look at Jane Street. This is kind of a bizarre street if you're familiar with this area down in the, the 20s down there. It connects kind of the upper part of that area down with Tunnelly Avenue. It's kind of a hidden side street in North Bergen. The name is actually for Annie Jane. Now, Annie Jane is a young girl who was abandoned by her parents in the 1880s at the age of 8. She was born down in that area near where present-day Jane Street was. At the time, it was just called New Street when she was born, but she lived there most of her childhood, she lived most of her childhood in the almshouse in Secaucus. And she lived a brief life as a servant for this woman, Teresa Emmett, in New York City. She'll pass away in 1893 during this kind of massive tuberculosis outbreak in the city. The street is sometime in between 1917 and 1921. 21 is the first reference we could find. 17 is the last reference to New Street. But the people of the area kind of came and went to the town and asked to have it changed in honor of the young Annie. So it's a very interesting street there. You have this smaller street tucked away back here. Really nobody is taking this unless you're worked with NJ Transit or got lost trying to get on Route 3 or off of Route 3. But there's Penhorn Avenue, which is named for Penhorn Creek, which was originally named for William Pinehorn. So Pinehorn was a very active in colonial New Jersey. He was named the governor at one point of the New Jersey East Provincial Council. So we're going way back. He's going to live in the area, right? Today, we would say he lived out more in Secaucus, but he's going to live in our area from 1676 until his death in 1720. So gets a creek named after him and eventually gets this small kind of street named after him. And we'll come over here, Lincoln Terrace. That's a pretty obvious one, named for President Lincoln. And then we'll take a look at these kind of smaller ones tucked back here. We have Givnard Terrace. Givnard Terrace is named for the Givnard family, in particular, Miss Barbara Givnard. Mrs. Givnard married Entine Givnard, who was once one of the owners of this very large silk mill in North Bergen. Their home was turned later into St. Joseph's Orphanage, which once stood near present-day Charles Court. The street was named in her honor, or at least the name of the honor of the Givnards in the 1940s. All right, and the terrace was originally known as Columbia Terrace, which connected to Old Grand Avenue, which actually ran into the old Columbia Park, the old amusement park. So you could have actually kind of snuck into the park from back there. You then have Charles Court, and again, like very similar to the developing streets. It's named for Charles Jackson, the owner of the development. He's from Northvale. He built some homes on the street. And the street's actually created in 1961. So Mr. Jackson got the ability to name a street after himself. Take a look at Union Turnpike next. So Union Turnpike is originally named Patterson Turnpike. And again, once led into Patterson. The roadway was renamed in the 20s with the creation of Route 3, right? Because now it doesn't even lead to Patterson, so you got to change that up. And it's dubbed Union Turnpike. And again, if you take a look at some of the older maps, it connects with Union Township. It connects with present-day Union City. So that is why they're going to change it to that. We'll head a little further north, to Gurr Place. And this is a pretty cool one. It's named for Richard and his son, Harry. Now, they're German immigrants who originally settled in Hoboken. They will eventually move to North Bergen around 1920. The Gares are going to operate a small masonry business located on the southwestern corner of present-day Gur and Bergen Turnpike. Now, the first reference is Gur Place in 1926. But like something it bothers me, and I think this is the teacher in me. It's called Gur Place, but I wonder why it's not possessive or plural, right? It's Gur's Place, like it's their street, or it's named after both of them. So why wouldn't it be Gur's Place? I don't know. These are things that keep me up late at night. Let's keep going. All right, you have Edward Street. It's one of these small ones. If you ever trying to sneak that red light on Tunnelly Avenue, you're coming out of that Dunkin' Donuts over there. That's where Edward Street is. It's one of the smallest streets in town, if not the shortest, the smallest street. So it's named actually for Edward Rowland. So Edward Streets and Rowland Place, which was present day 42nd Street. Rowland is born in New Durham in the neighborhood down there in the 1860s. And as an adult, he's this prominent member of the community. And again, he's a real estate developer. He develops that area. So when you get that, you get to name a street after yourself. Kind of again, another sneak away street. You're trying to beat lights on Tunnelly Avenue. You have Dell Avenue, right? The Dell in Dell Avenue is a marker kind of to the geographical history of the area. The name recalls, and again, this is coming out of a Jersey Journal archive article, recalls when the area was deemed a small valley, usually among the trees. And it's pretty interesting to hear that, because if you ever go on Dell Avenue today, it's extremely industrial. It's hard to imagine the Dell. But again, it makes sense, because if you stand on Dell Avenue and look east, you'll see the Palisades rising. And if you look west, you'll be able to see out over the meadows and into the Watchung Mountain Ridge. So again, that's kind of where it's coming from in the physical history of it. You have Hamburg Place. Again, I think most people see that and they just assume it's an error on the city of Hamburg, right? But it's actually named for a German immigrant, Henry Hamburg, and Hamburg arrives in North Bergen, like a lot of German immigrants in the 1870s. He's originally a milk dealer receiving shipments of fresh milk from the New Durham station. He lives on present-day Ashoff Place. And again, he was the street's originally called Maple Avenue, and he lived there with his wife Anna, son Harry, and the Hamburgs. Place replaced the already named Elm Street in the late 1920s. So again, when you're a prominent figure in the community, people are going to name things after you, and that's goes for the street next to it as well, which is Ashoff Place. Ashoff Place is going to be named for Charles Ashoff. Ashoff is going to purchase most of the property between 46th Street and 49th Street from Tunnelly to Dell Ave from Henry Hamburg. So he does this with his business partner, George Cox. And when Cox passes away in 1910, Ashoff is the sole owner of basically all that property down there. Now, what happens is Ashoff Place is named in the early 20s. It's changed from Nolan Avenue, right? Nolan was at one point the mayor of North Bergen, which was originally changed from Maple Street. So Charles Ashoff, again, when he was down there, prior to a lot of the homes being built, he's going to operate a lumber yard. And he actually is in the house moving industry, which is something like it's kind of bizarre to think about today, but the Ashoff family was known for moving homes all over North Bergen. So it's a pretty cool kind of piece of history there. There was at one point in the 50s, the town proposed to change the name of the street. However, 12 families which lived on the street, 4 of them being direct descendants of Charles Ashoff, appealed the town successfully, and the name was stuck ever since. So that's a pretty interesting one down there. Here you have Meadowview Avenue. So Meadowview just runs throughout the town at different areas. And again, it's one of those streets geographically named, right? Named for that view you get of the meadows of Secaucus, right? And again, if you're ever out there especially on a nice day like today, you get a nice sunset when you look out that way. Now we'll go further north. Almost finished up here. We'll go here with Granton Avenue. Granton comes from, Granton Avenue is named for the roadway, which took you to Granton Station. Okay, a lot of our areas on Tunnelly Avenue, we're going to see them heavily influenced by the railroad industries that were there, by a lot of the train stops that were there. The word Granton dates back to the 1840s, when it was first identified as an early neighborhood in North Bergen. The word Granton itself is derived from the French word for grand, which means great. Again, it was also commonly used as a nickname for a large or tall person. It's because of this we believe the area is referred to because of the bluestone cliffs that were there that were once quarried and kind of taken away along Tunnelly Avenue during the 19th century. So again, goes back to this kind of long forgotten history that the town has of our, quarrying industry. Take a look here, Smith Ave. That's going to be named for Abel I. Smith, who was a very prominent lawyer. He lived in New Durham, was educated in the North Bergen school system, and the Smith family, they're members of Grove Reformed Church, one of the early members of the church. So very influential in the town. His father's actually one of the lawyers, a judge in the county. So they're very prominent. Then you have Durham Avenue. This name is just going to recall the earliest neighborhoods in North Bergen. So New Durham, right? A lot of people know that. And we're going to talk more about where that even comes from in the next segment here. But the street was created in the early 20th century as acts of tributes to the town history. Originally, the street had many different names because, again, Durham Avenue is one of those streets that runs the entire length of town. So depending on where you were and when you are, you could have been on 2nd Street. You could have been on Delaware. You could have been on John, on Lovett, on Kiesel, on New Durham Place, or Poplar Ave, or Poplar Street, excuse me. So there is a lot of changes that do go on here. And we'll talk about that when we're at the end. Then you have Newkirk. Again, the Newkirk, very prominent name in New Jersey history. The Newkirk family, Matthias and Garrett Newkirk, were one of the first Dutch settlers to arrive in New Netherlands in the 1630s. And they had their children, John, Henry, Garrett, and George, would go on to own land throughout Hudson County. And they owned land in the northern end between Kennedy and Tunnelly Avenue today. So if you're going to own land over there, you're going to get a street named after you. Cottage Ave refers simply to the original cottages that were built along that street. It's kind of hard to imagine because there's none left today. But Cottage Ave, that's where we get that one from. A lot of people think it's the Cottage Coke Factory, but that actually gets its name from, the street, the cottages. Dane Court, again, one of those streets that were made by a developer. We did reach out just to get confirmation if that was a designated name from the town or perhaps a child or whatever, but we still have not heard back from Mr. Steyer. A couple of streets tucked away off of tunneling. You have Nolan Ave. Nolan's named for, like I said earlier, like James, the old Ashoff place. It's named for Mayor James Nolan. He's actually a huge piece of North Bergen history. He's going to serve as police commissioner. He's going to be a tax assessor. He's going to become mayor during World War I. He oversees the construction of Town Hall. He gets North Bergen a federal post office. He was also the first mayor to adopt daylight savings. Okay. And Nolan was very successful career in real estate and insurance during his post-mayorship years. And many residents may actually remember the old James Nolan Insurance on Bergen Turnpike. That's where he operated his business out of for years until his death. One thing I always like to bring up when you talk about James Nolan is he was once, along with his family, siblings anyways, they were in the Guinness Book of Records for a long time as the largest family to be in existence. Mr. Nolan himself was like 6'4" and like almost like 280 pounds, and his sisters were equally as big. They were a big group of people. So it's I think that's always interesting to talk about. You then have Ampassil Drive. Ampassil Drive is named for the distributors that are back there, candy distributor, operated by a Cuban immigrant, Antonio Pelez. The company set up shop when the street was called Raustein Avenue, which was created in 1941 for the Grand Paper Company. And North Bergen in 1974, Ampassil Drive was then created basically in honor of their contributions to the children of North Bergen. The Ampassil distributors, and again, if you played Little League Baseball in this town, they sponsor teams every year. So very big members of the community. Bouncing back towards Kennedy Boulevard, you got Kelly Lane, right? One of the really interesting streets in town, right? It's just a dead end street. But the street dates back to the 1870s. That said, it wasn't until the turn of the 20th century that we get the name Kelly Lane. The lane is a shortcut, really, that once connected present-day Kennedy Boulevard with Cottage Ave. It wasn't until the 20s that 72nd Street was widened and extended. So that replaces the original lane. So Kelly Lane, this roadway was named for local resident John Kelly. Kelly, an Irish immigrant. He came to North Bergen again around 1853, worked in dock construction. The Kellys will live at roughly 5252 Hudson Boulevard today. Today that's going to be 7014. So that's where the storage units are. Over time, Kelly, though, purchases a ton of property there. He begins to build a ton of homes back there. And he's got this intention to build all the way down to Cottage Avenue, which he gets pretty close as the area develops. Today, it's really just a shortcut for the kids from North Bergen High School. They cut through there to get down, instead of walking all the way down to 70th Street. So we'll move into these kind of streets here. These are I call them our Guttenberg streets. We have Adams, Jackson, Polk, and Madison. And if you were paying attention in history class, those 4 streets are named after presidents of the United States. So we get our Guttenberg streets, we carry the names over for them. You then have this kind of small street, Lucky Lane, tucked in there off of 76th Street. It's named August 30th, 1999. The name was given by the developer who built the homes there, so you got to pick it. Perhaps they were hoping that it would bring them some luck and the new constructions would sell pretty quickly, right? And maybe they were just wishful thinking for the upcoming new year, right? As people were panicking with Y2K was growing all over the place. So who knows? Maybe we'll see. We'll find that out one day if the developer ever gets back to us. Now we'll take a look over here and we'll go into Park Avenue. Park Avenue, clearly named because it gets you into Hudson County Park. We'll go with Broadway. Broadway is very similar to Columbia Avenue, which we'll get to. Broadway's original name is a mystery. It could refer to the literal width, right? It's a Broadway, or it could be like Wall Street, which is in the northern end of town, which is a tribute to the roadway across the Hudson there. And again, it might have been done to create somewhat of a confusion and perhaps get real estate savvy people to think they're buying in New York, but they're actually buying in New Jersey. Buyer beware, do your due diligence. So we're really kind of up in the air on that one. Hudson Ave, named for the Hudson River, named for Henry Hudson. Palisade Avenue, named for the mighty Palisades, which North Bergen sits on. You have Bergen Line Avenue. Now, Bergen Line is a very large street. North Bergen has 4.4 miles of it. It's been a major thoroughfare throughout its entire history. For the last 150 years, it's served as the economic hub for the township that it intersects. But the name Bergen Line, what does it actually mean? Now, it actually will refer to the fact that it takes you to the county line, the Bergen County line. So again, it's originally called the Bergen Line Road. So again, it becomes Bergen Line Avenue in the 1890s. So again, it's in reference to where it's going. Then we'll head into kind of up north here. We have a couple of roads here. We have Bulls Ferry Road, which is named for a family. It's named for the Bulls family, which operated a ferry at one point at the base of River Road. We have a couple of streets tucked in here. We have Churchill Road. Most people will think it's named for Winston Churchill, but if you joined us last month, you know that it is not named for Churchill Road. It's actually named because there was once a church that was there. All right, so it is called Churchill Road. It was Sacred Heart Church, which was once located there. We then have Old River Road, which simply is named Old River Road because they created New River Road. You have Riverside Place, pretty self-explanatory. It is next to the river. You then have, we'll zoom in here because there's an array of streets kind of tucked in here. You have Wall Street. So again, there's no evidence supporting either of these claims. This is just where I'm thinking, where my head is at. First, like New York's Wall Street, it could refer to the literal wall that might have been there, right? What or where the wall was is up for debate. And again, one can imagine the Palisades being the topographical wall. Maybe it refers to the steepness of the hill, as it appears as the wall was standing at, you're standing at the base of a wall, or perhaps it refers to a property line that no longer exists. Second, it could also be taken from New York's Wall Street. And the street was originally known as Dyer's Lane in reference to Wall Street, we get it in 1909. Now, if you ever go down to the base of Wall Street, you get a couple of streets tucked in there. You get Valley Road. So again, Valley Road, if you ever driven down there, it really does feel like you're driving into an abyss. It's very green on one side and, there's some homes tucked in there. It's hard to even begin to understand how people decided to build homes down there, again, at the bottom of the road. But again, it could refer to the geographical idea of down the valley of the Palisades. You have Francis Place, which is down there. Again, it's believed to be named after Francis Dyer, right? Prior to Wall Street being named, it was known as Dyer Lane, as the Dyer family owned all the property that's in this area. Augustus Dyer operated a grocery store near present-day Woodcliff and Palisade Avenue, where the gas station is today. And during the 19th century, he did that. From the records we found, Francis was born around 1845 and was one of the last Dyers to live in the area. We have Albert Place. That's going to be named after Albert Marx, and we'll talk about him because he's also named, Marx Place is named for him. Again, he's a land developer. So when, again, you develop land, you get to name things after yourself. Hillcrest Road, again, named and created by Albert Marx. And again, it rests at the crest of the hill, right above Shadyside. Here we have Marx Place, like we just said, named for Albert Marx and the Marx family. We have Camp Place. Now, Camp Place is named for Mary Camp. Mary was born in France around 1850 and immigrated to the United States in 1868. So according to census record, Camp made her money as a broker on the New York Cotton Exchange, which is kind of revolutionary because it's a woman operating as a stockbroker in the 1860s, right? So she's a very influential woman. Camp bought a ton of property in that area, present-day New York, Ave, that's up there, Camp Place, Palisade Avenue. And she slowly started to sell them off around 1910. And then the street was named for her since 1905. So pretty cool piece of history. Barr Place is going to be named for Frederick Barr of Hoboken. Barr owned a bunch of hotels in New York City and Hudson County. And he purchased a ton of that property in and around Palisade Plaza and New York Ave. In 1899, we found the record sales receipt for $5,000. Palisade Plaza, again, been a reference to the Palisades that it sits on. Fulton Ave, and I mean, listen, if you're the father of the steamboat, you get a school named after you, you get a street named after you, right? When you're Robert Fulton, you are a major American figure. We got Heindel Avenue, right? Very bizarre kind of name. So it's named for Sixtus Heindel, right? And the Heindel and his family, they lived in there and owned much of the property between Hamilton and Palisade Plaza, going back into the 1850s. Heindel was a baker by trade, but as he retired, he actually turned his property into Heindel's pine forest, which he used as an attraction during Little Coney Island. And effectively was, you paid him for money and you walked around his backyard, which was full of pine trees. People were very ingenious back then. We also have a little piece of Hamilton Avenue. There's no addresses for North Bergen on Hamilton Avenue, but it's named after Alexander Hamilton. And we'll wrap up here. We have 2 or 3 more streets here. We have Bergenwood Avenue, which just references the Bergenwood section of town, Bergenwood Park, the original neighborhood. We'll talk about that in a second. All right. And again, that's where you get that. You also have Easy Street, Dead End Street, kind of tucked in down there. Chances are, and again, I'm taking a shot on this one, but I feel like it's a good reference. Our first reference is going to be in 1934. Okay. We really don't have anybody to ask. There's no reference to developers, but we do know one of the major hit films of the era, right? Easy Street, featuring Charlie Chaplin, was made in 1917. So I'm going to take a guess here, an educated guess, and say that's where we're going to get that name from. We also have our last street, Manzoni Place. It's named for Ralph Manzoni. He's an Italian immigrant. Manzoni made his way to North Bergen around 1900 and owned and operated a construction company which specialized in road work. The first reference to the street is actually going to be made in 1952. Now, I said that was our last street. I was wrong because I forgot about the forgotten part of North Bergen back here. This is the Orchard Grove area, the Bon Camino Park area, right? Depends again, who you are and where you're from, but you have a couple of streets back there. You have Fairview Avenue, really named out of simplicity because the only way you could get in and out of this neighborhood is through Fairview. Okay. You have Railroad Avenue, simply named because it's on a railroad. You have Lesser Place, which we really don't know where that comes from. We don't know what it's in reference to, if it's a person or if it's whatever it is. But that's always kind of been the name that it's been back there. So again, I'm gonna assume it's named after a person, because I don't know who would want to live on Lesser Place saying it's a street that's lesser. Lakeview Avenue is actually named because at one point, where the Hackensack River is going to be meeting Wolf Creek, a lake actually will form there when there is a lot of rain. So again, you get that name, Lakeview Avenue. Now, I will pause it up there if there's any questions about these streets before we move into our last part here, the neighborhoods. I think I see that it's pronounced Give or Note. Okay, see, I didn't know that. I'm getting caught up on that.
Let me
All
just
right.
see if any of the people here who are live have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone? Okay. Yes, no questions so far.
All right, no questions. All right, makes it easy for me. All right, let's change gears here for a second. So we did some streets. Now let's talk about the neighborhoods these streets are located in. Now, I have this kind of map here. We'll zoom in and out, and it's only fair. We started at the northern end of town. Let's start here and we'll work our way downtown. So I made a lot of references to neighborhoods. This neighborhood here highlighted in the red, this is that Orchard Park, that Bone Camino Park. There's a lot, it's all industry now today, but at one point Orchard Grove, right, was really like a big and kind of agricultural area. It gets its name because there's a ton of apple trees back there at one point. You have a ton of hotels, you have boat clubs back there. A lot of people actually would use this as a swimming area, which again is when we talk about swimming in the Hackensack River today, a lot of people make a face. But again, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, this bend in these rivers would have been covered with beaches for people to go and try to beat the heat. So again, Orchard Grove is kind of this forgotten area. And again, it's a part of North Bergen, but you can't get to it through North Bergen. You have to go into Fairview to get there, which is pretty interesting. There's another section of town right next to it, which is called Babbitt. The Babbitt neighborhood in North Bergen, again, it's named for the Babbitt Soap Factory, which was created by B.T. Babbitt, 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And operates in there until about the end of World War II before they move out. So the Babbitt neighborhood, not really like a community neighborhood, but still something I would call a neighborhood. You have the entire area here of Granton, right? Granton is just going to be a large industrial area that stretches from the town border, again, all the way down to about Route 3. So you have that. You have a large neighborhood here. You have Bergen. Now, Bergenwood is this long, narrow district in North Bergen. Again, it's kind of a central part of the township between Kennedy and Tunnelly. It's characterized by the steep slopes, right, of the Palisades that run off into the Meadowlands. It is really this North Bergen's distinction of being this municipality where the most hills are, right? This is where we get our great story of we're the second hilliest town next to San Francisco. Now, I can tell you, one time, when I first met my wife and I had an old beat up car and my car broke down and, I was down in central Jersey somewhere and the tow truck driver brought me up and we took Tunnelly Avenue and he first looked at, some of the hills and he looked at 64th Street and he said, I'm not driving up there. And I said, it only gets worse, buddy. And as we drove through each intersection, the poor guy stopped and looked at every hill and said, how do people live here? Long story short, he actually drove me into Richfield to get me up to Kennedy Boulevard to bring me to Town Service Center when it was still in operation. So again, these hills for us in North Bergen, normal way of life. For people outside of our town, very bizarre, very, very free. It freaks them out a little bit. But in Bergenwood, you have some subset neighborhoods. Okay, you have Bergenwood Park, which is gonna be this area here in town, about 88th Street up to 91st Street. Now, why is it called Bergenwood Park versus just Bergenwood? Well, this is gonna be the first part of the area that's settled. Okay, this is gonna be the first area that's developed. So during the early development, this late 19th century, early 20th century, the rest of the Bergenwood section really is just wooded land. There's not a lot there. There's no gridded streets. There's nothing going on there. So again, that's going to be the first group to settle in there, is that Bergenwood Park area. You then get kind of a forgotten neighborhood, the Terrace Park neighborhood, which is referencing to the Terrace Park Realty Company. They're going to develop that whole area. And again, these names come and go with time. So Terrace Park, not really familiar to most people, but it is going to be one of those historical neighborhoods. You then go into this neighborhood over here, and we'll bounce back north again. I just want to wrap up Bergenwood here. So you get this neighborhood, again, the jungles. This is something I've heard my entire life. I grew up in that area. Today, that is where the Meadowview complex is, the Meadowview housing complex is. The name comes from a very, very long time ago. It references the overgrowth of vegetation that's in the area. So that idea that it's a jungle, right? You know, most people when they were moving here didn't see this dense kind of forestry that would have been in this area at one point. So you get that. It's also home. And again, the area gets this reputation of being very rough and being very, you know, an area full of aggressive people, because during the Great Depression, it's actually home to a shanty town. And again, we have a great piece that's on our website about, you know, that area during the Depression, about George Fuso and you know, the beer baron of North Bergen and all that Prohibition era stuff that took place there. So that's got a really great name, and people, you still hear people reference to the jungle, and you know, that's pretty cool. Let's bounce back up north. You get Haas's Point. Again, that's kind of an older term, right? You know, but that comes from the Haas family, who settles here in the 1860s, and they're going to own and operate several businesses up and into the 20th century up there. Most residents might remember Haas Oldsmobile, right, which was located there. So you got that. Next door to them, the other old family name, the Nungessers area. Most of us know that from taking the bus, right? Again, that's kind of where North Bergen and Hudson and Bergen County meet with Fairview. It comes from the Nungesser racetrack, right? From the family, the hotel that was up there. Big gambling and gaming revenue. The neighborhood is just south, right, of that racetrack. Today we got White Castles there. It's going to be the 6th White Castles ever created, right? Built there in the 1930s. So you got that. You then have the racetrack itself, right? Which you've been on our walking tour, which we'll hopefully be hosting again this summer, right? We will be going and talking about the history of the Guttenberg racetrack, right? Which was a infamous racetrack that operated there end of the 19th century into the 20th century, and has a great colorful history of corruption and crime, but something most residents find very interesting. It's not until the 20s that we get this racetrack section of town, though. Then come over here into this yellow area here north of the park called Hudson Heights. And the name strictly comes because it's above the heights, very similar to how Jersey City Heights gets its name, right? It's because it's overlooking the Hudson River. We come along here on the waterfront here. Now, we get this blue area, the shady side area. Okay, again, that gets its name because of the shade casted by the Palisades, one of the older neighborhoods in North Bergen, probably the smallest kind of neighborhood. It looks very large on the map here, but there is not a lot of room for development there. I always like to give some credit to my friend Ron, who is no longer with us, but Ron dubbed this one, and I think it's important. He dubbed this one section Upper Shady Side. That's going to be the bottom of Wall Street, that Valley Road, Francis Place, Albert Place, right? That is that Upper Shady Side neighborhood, which, you know, connects to the bottom via an old footpath. So that's pretty cool. You then have Woodcliff on Hudson, right? And again, a lot of times we're going to see Woodcliff on Hudson and Woodcliff itself kind of interchange. We've gone beyond that now, where Woodcliff itself is going to be a standalone neighborhood, and Woodcliff on Hudson has become this area, this little sliver area north of the park. Again, back to Woodcliff, that's going to be developed by the Woodcliff Land Improvement Company. It's going to be organized by Hamilton Meeks in 1891. And again, this is really the area that puts North Bergen on the map. This is going to be the area where a lot of people come because they are escaping Manhattan. It's going to be the first time a lot of people could buy their own home. So it is a very, very interesting neighborhood. You have the Bulls Ferry neighborhood, right? That's mostly the riverfront. Everything from Bulls Ferry to our Guttenberg border, right, would be referred to as Bulls Ferry. We'll come down now back south. We have this pretty weird area. It's two areas here, and you know, it's kind of weird. They're both named Van Glandville, right? That's what it's originally called. And it's named after the Gland family, which were very big operators in the town. Albert Gland was a prominent member of the town and town council. But it's interesting because Lower Glandville is north. It's well, not north, but it's on top of the hill. And Upper Glanville is at the bottom of the hill. And it's interesting because it's kind of doesn't make sense. But you have to understand the history of the town. At one point, this area down here, Upper Glanville, would have actually been closer to, obviously, New Durham, but closer to all the action of town. So they would have looked at this Lower Glanville section as being further away from, the life of the city, the town. So it's an interesting look there. You have New Durham. That's our big historical piece, our big historical neighborhood. Colonial American Community Center there. There's Three Pigeons Hotel, which was down there. Okay. And again, that is going to be the site of some major action during the Revolutionary War. It's going to be a watering hole for people. It's a midway point between Hackensack and Jersey City. And again, there is a large population that's always going to be centered in this area. So it is pretty interesting to see that. And again, I like that because it's starting to see a comeback again. You have the Meadowview section of town. And again, that kind of stretches in and out of town, much like the Meadowview Street. Again, that's named for just the physical view of the meadows. You have Buena Vista, which, again, that's a really interesting one, especially because the name comes from the 19th century. And again, it's referencing those views of the mountain ranges out west. And again, Buena Vista, the good view, right? Very cool to see that. We then have Schutzen Park. Okay, so Schutzen Park is this kind of private area in North Bergen, right? It was started in 1872 as a shooting club. Schutzen actually means shooter in German. Again, and it was home to all these German kind of festivals and communities and clubs. At one point, there was a soccer field there with, clubs coming from around the state, from New York City to play games. Huge festivals there. Most residents will remember for Fritz Reuter, the retirement home there. Today it is now Columbia Park is there, and the Helix, and there's a new name to the retirement home that's there. But traditionally we would call that Schutzen Park. We can go a little further south. You get Columbia Park. Now again, Columbia Park, I know it says it here on the map, right? But this Columbia Park is actually named due to the developer, right? The Columbia Park Real Estate Company. They are going to build all the homes on 27th Street and use the fame of the park to name their company and then name the neighborhood they built. You then get Floral Park, right? Floral Park, again, was one of these great kind of pleasure resorts that they had kind of strewn throughout town in the early 20th century, late 19th century. And again, the park is there. There's hosting tons of events. They actually had a major wrestling tournament there every 4th of July. Called Turnfest. And men from across the United States would come, and it would be like, this big patriotic celebration of the United States. And the winner would be dubbed, Mr. America every year. So it was a really cool tournament they would have there. You then have Weavertown, which is this long stretch from about 22nd Street down to about 15th Street. And Weavertown is in reference to the industry that used to be there. There was massive weaving industries there. And we're talking pre-industrialization weaving industry. We're not talking with, factories and things like that. So real older name of that. And then last, and certainly not least, so my downtown people don't get mad at me, you have Tyler Park. Now, Tyler Park comes from the man who laid out the streets, Mr. Phineas L. Tyler. He's a land developer, an entrepreneur coming out of Red Hook. He comes to Hudson County like many others during the post-Civil War era. There was cheap land here. And if you've been kind of keeping score, you'll notice most of the people we've talked about that have things named for them did all come here during that kind of right before the Civil War or during it or right after, right? And this is the legacy of these people that we're still looking at today. Mr. Tyler is going to be there, but he does not work alone. He actually partners with Mr. Charles Gobish. Gobish is a founding member of Hudson City Savings, which is one of these respected financial institutions in the county during his time of operation. So those are your streets. Those are your neighborhoods. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know we're doing things a little different. I guess let's take some questions.
We do have one question in the chat box. Are we now in Union City? Where can we get these maps and information you are sharing? This is very interesting.
Okay, so everything I have is on our website, the North Bergen Historical Society blog. Let me actually pull that up and I could throw it in the chat.
And you can also get to this from the library's webpage as well.
So here we go. So we'll throw it in the chat here. So feel free to go in, take a look, poke around, ton of good stuff on there.
Do we have questions from the in-person people? All right. I did have a question. You mentioned Patterson Plank Road was a plank road.
Yes.
Do we have a lot of plank roads in the area? Were they common? And when did they give way to the more traditional pavement roads?
Sure. So we, most of the roads in our town were planked at one point. Kennedy Boulevard at certain points in time and certain points where geographically speaking would have been planked. Tunnelly Avenue would have been planked. Fairview Avenue was planked. Patterson Plank was planked. So we have a ton of these. And again, it goes into the fact that, prior to asphalt and, modern construction, everything's horse and buggy. And if it rains, and again, we've all lived in town, we all know what it looks like when it rains. Now imagine that with no pavement, okay? That all starts to change around the early 20th century. Really in North Bergen, about 1910 to 1920, everything gets paved, right? We really don't see any more planked roads after that. But all of those, and again, Patterson Plank Road's a really interesting one because it's really interesting to think, like, you have a plank road going from North Bergen physically all the way out to Patterson, New Jersey. That's a lot of lumber, which would be, I could imagine it's extremely difficult to maintain. But also what we're leaving out when we look at these plank roads, they all had toll houses on them. So you actually had to pay a toll to use a lot of these roads. So for example, if we come, I'll use this map because we're looking at it. Gotta go all the way uptown. So if we actually came into North Bergen, or we're trying to get into North Bergen, and you got here, right, where Fairview Avenue is, okay, and Tunnelly Avenue, there would have been a toll gate here, right? There would have actually been a toll gate here getting in from Bergen County to Hudson County. And then there would have been a toll by Dan Kelly, and then later the other operators, for you to bring your material up the hills. So you had toll booths there. You had a couple of toll booths near like present day 70th Street. You had one where Jersey City meets North Bergen. So they had ways to charge people money for using these plank roads, which all went into, maintenance. Very similar to the way we use the turnpike or the parkway today.
Awesome. Thank you. I do have a question in the back. Do you want to come closer so that he can hear you? You just got to get a little bit closer to the thing. Yeah, you can hear you from there.
So since you were just talking about the toll booths, are there any like leftover toll booths that you've seen, or like any pieces or pictures?
So we have a couple of images of the toll booths on our Facebook page. The only toll booth we actually have an image of is like, it's not even a picture of the toll booth. It's supposed to be a picture of this Flower Hill Cemetery's gate that they just installed, yet the toll booth is in the background. So there's no remnants of them anywhere. There was no efforts to save them. I think people were like, let's get rid of these things and never imagine that we paid tolls. But we only have that one image of a toll gate on Tunnelly Avenue near Flower Hill Cemetery. So it really is this kind of bygone thing, which most people would be, I think today, if you were on Tunnelly Avenue, you saw a toll booth, I think people would think it's absurd. But back then, this would have been a total normal thing for them to see and deal with.
Thank you. Any other questions from the in-person group? All right, and I didn't see any other questions from the chat either. So in that case, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who came out to see the presentation tonight, both virtually and in person. And sorry for the glitches that we were having to the in-person people. And Mike, a very big thank you for you to taking time out of your day to come out and give this presentation for us tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Liz. It was a pleasure. Next month, I promise I'll be back in person. If the weather's nice, maybe we could get the walking tours going. All right, we'll make up for sitting around today. So we'll get out pound the paper. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Very good. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Bye, everyone.